Hello friends, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Parthopotim Bora from Department of Sociology, Dibrugarh University, Assam. The title of this module is Functionalism, Neo-Functionalism, System Analysis, Talcott Parsons from the paper Contemporary Social Theory. So this module will basically give the understanding of the theories of Talcott Parsons within the broader school of functionalism, neo-functionalism and system analysis. So this module basically talk about the various theories of Talcott Parsons, like his understanding of unit act, his theory of voluntaristic theory of action, as well as it will also talk about the AGIL model that was developed by Talcott Parsons, also his understanding of pattern variable. In the last part of the module, we will discuss the criticism that was arise against the work of Talcott Parsons. So this is the broad overview of the module. As you know, functionalism as a school of thought was traced back, or the root of the origin of functionalism was traced back to the work of earlier theories like anthropological tradition like Brunsklo, Malinowski or A.R. Radcliffe Brown. But in the field of sociology, we can see the origin of the work of Talcott Parsons or the work of functionalism in the work of Emile Durkheim. So the Durkheimian work basically was a precursor for the development of functionalism. So Parsons' understanding of functionalism basically talk about how the interdependent parts where the social institution exists because of the functional prerequisite, and he also talk about how the various institutions have some function for the existence of the society. So it's idea of the functional prerequisite whereby each part of the system or the society have some function to perform, and which is essential for the survival of the society. And this is the whole idea of functional prerequisite as it was understood by Talcott Parsons. Another important concept that was developed by the Talcott Parsons is his theory of voluntaristic theory of action. So whereby he was basically making an attempt to do away with the problem of teleology that was a part of functionalism. So his theory tried to define the relationship between the structure and the individual. He regarded the individual as a reference point where action is influenced by the social system in which he is located, but at the same time whose action can also influence the social system. So what Talcott Parsons was basically trying to argue here, that although the function of the individual is influenced by the social system, on the other hand, the function of the individual can also influence the social system. So it is not like the one-way process. On the one hand, the function of the individual is influenced by the social system. On the other hand, the function of the individual can also influence the social system. So this is one of the interesting arguments that was given by the Talcott Parsons in order to see the relation between the structure and the individual. But his understanding of functionalism got some setback because of the criticism that was offered against the Talcott Parsons functionalism, especially in the context of development of neo-functionalism in the 1980s, which we will discuss in a more detailed manner in the later part of this module. So Talcott Parsons, as already you are becoming aware of, he is one of the most dominant theories within the school of functionalism. And now let us discuss his voluntaristic theory of action. So Parsons basically postulated his theory on the basis of a kind of context of the two important theories that was present during that time, that was the idea of positivism and the idea of idealism. So that these two approaches in sociology, the idea of positivism on the one hand, the idea of idealism on the other hand, was basically the kind of basis for the development of voluntaristic theory of action by the Talcott Parsons. While trying to understand how individuals behave in the context of the particular system, his structure of social action that was published in 1937, he tried to provide an analytical approach and explore the difference between the concept of behavior as a mechanical response to stimuli and the action as an inventive process, which is subjective aspect. He professed that social behavior must be understood in terms of the diverse external influences or stimuli acting upon it, but at the same time, he maintained that the point of reference should be human action. This is the voluntaristic theory of action, which is also known as action frame of reference. So, his emphasis on the action or the theory of action was the root of his understanding. While trying to give the voluntaristic theory of action, he was giving emphasis on the idea of unit act. So, unit act basically talk about the act of individual actor, whereby the individual has some end, or the system consists of different individuals who have some end or goal. But while in the attempt to attain that goal, they are constrained by the external as well as their behavioral system. He tried to identify the understanding of unit act by identifying it as a basic element by combining both objective and the subjective into the single scheme. Parsons forwarded his idea of unit act on the basis of some of the basic elements of social life, and he defined it with the characteristics like an end, a situation where the action takes place, which can be analyzed by the means to reach that end, and the condition. And third is the at least one selected standard in terms of which end is related to the situation. So these are the three important characteristics of the unit act that was given by the Talcott Parsons. He further said that the unit act does not work in isolation. So for Parsons, the reference point for the action is agency or individual, and it is a process oriented towards the realization of an end, which occur in conditional circumstances that must be calculated upon by the actor while pursuing their end. In his later part of the work, Parsons continued to search for a theoretical synthesis through his AGIL formulation, which conceptualized society as constituting interacting of the four subsystems, that is the economics, politics, integration, and the value maintenance. So basically what he was trying to do in terms of this four subsystems, he tried to see how the integration is maintained in the society. These are the four subsystems that was seen in the AGIL model, and he was trying to see how these four subsystems help to maintain the integration in the society. AGIL paradigm that was developed by Parsons, basically the part of larger action theory. Parsons specified that any social system that persists has certain need, and AGIL scheme seek to explain how the social system meet this need and maintain that order, both its external environment as well as internal organization. So the AGIL model basically trying to see how the need are fulfilled in the system. So how there are need for the each subsystem and how this need of the each subsystem are fulfilled. According to Parsons, every system rests on the four functional imperative, which he categorized as AGIL system. The adaptive function, whereby a system adapts to its environment. The goal attainment function, how a system defines and achieves its goal. The integrative function, which talk about the regulation of the component of the system, while the latency or the pattern maintenance function, which talk about the stimulation of motivation and that of the dimension of culture that create and sustain motivation. So the adaptation, goal attainment, integration, and latency, that are the four part or the four subsystem that was talked by Talcott Parsons, is associated with the four broader subsystem, and that is associated ultimately with the system. So that basically talk about how in each subsystem the particular objective or the particular functional imperative is fulfilled. and the fulfillment of particular functional imperative in a particular subsystem, whether it is the case of adaptation, goal attainment, integration or latency, that help in the survival of the system. And while talking about the agile system, he also talked about the 4 other systems that are associated with agile system. These are the behavioral system that is associated with the adaptation, the personality system that is associated with the goal attainment, the social system that is associated with the integrative function. The last one is the cultural system that is associated with the pattern maintenance. And what Talcott Parsons said, these 4 systems, the behavioral system, social system, personality system or the cultural system, these are kind of the 4 systems. And he said that the 4 systems, if we take respectively, the behavioral system, personality system, social system and cultural system, they exist in a kind of hierarchy, and where the cultural system is the most dominant one. So basically Parsons talk about how this hierarchy, the behavior is at the bottom while the cultural system always exists at the top. So this is the hierarchical existence of the system as it was understood by Parsons. And again Parsons said that action constitute of the culture, or that is the values, norms, sources of motivation or the sources of energy, and people chooses the goal and the means within a particular cultural norms and the values they find themselves. So when an individual chooses the particular goal or the particular end, it is basically within the particular context of the cultural system. So we need to root, or we need to understand with reference to the particular cultural system. And in this cultural norm within the system, generalized symbol and the associated meaning, how the particular meaning or how the particular norms of the cultural system guide our goal or the particular end. He argued that social systems are complex and consist of a network of interdependent and interpenetrating subsystems, each of which, seen as appropriate level of reference, is a social system of its own right. So although there are 4 subsystems, they can work as a social system in their own. So this was the understanding that was given by Parsons. Now discuss the Parsons' understanding of role and the social structure. So Talcott Parsons gave importance to the role in the context of understanding the interaction of the individual and how they are interdependent to each other. So in Parsons' scheme of things, social interaction is a structured affair with a series of structural categories given in ascending order as a role, collectivity, norm and value, which roughly cover the social structure from individual to the social system. So in such a context, basically talking about the role in terms of interaction in the social system. So he was try to see the role, the question of role within a broader context of the social structure, while trying to see the interaction that take place among the individual. Thus, we can define role as a kind of something which is normatively regulated, where person participate in a concrete process of social interaction with specified concrete role partner, performing of a role within a collectivity defined the category of membership, which include the assumption of obligation of performance in that concrete interaction system. He further held that in any given system, the concept of role and the collectivity are particularistic. So if we take the case of any given system, the concept of role and the concept of collectivity are particularistic in its nature. Another important idea that was developed by Talcott Parsons within his functional analysis is the idea of pattern variable. So he said that pattern variable are basically the kind of inherent dilemma that come into play in the action of an individual. So it is seen, the pattern variables, they are seen by the Talcott Parsons as a kind of tool for the structural analysis. So he said that there are some pattern variables which basically work as a tool of structural analysis and which basically explain the nature of dilemma that the individual faces in their action. So say for example, he talk about the choices or the alternative that constitute the orientation, and there are basically 5 pattern variable of the role definition or the orientation that the person discusses. The 5 pattern variable are affectivity versus affective neutrality. The second one is private versus collective. The third one is universal versus particularism. The fourth one is achievement versus ascriptive role behavior. And the fifth one is specificity versus diffuseness. So these are the 5 kind of pattern variable that basically help us to understand the nature of dilemma that are faced by an individual in the various action. Now let us discuss these 5 pattern variables one by one. The first pattern variable, that is the affectivity and affective neutrality, basically talk about the question of gratification discipline dilemma. So how we can see our dilemma that is associated with the question of gratification. And the second pattern variable, that is the self orientation or collectivity, basically associated with the question of the dilemma which is associated with the whether we see our action in terms of self or the private, or we see our action in terms of collective. Dilemma that exists between the self and the collective is the second pattern variable, as it was understood by Parsons. The third pattern variable is the question of universalism and particularism. So it basically talk about the value orientation standard, whether it should be whether our value orientation standard should be the universal in its nature, or whether our value orientation standard will be particularistic in its nature. So while talking about the universal value, it basically talk about the values which are universally applicable, which are not rooted in the individual cases, but the particularistic which are in the object is seen in case of relational system. So that was the difference between the universal or the particularistic in orientation, and that was basically associated with the value orientation standard, how we see our value orientation in the particular action. Then the fourth one, of course, is the achievement and the ascriptive behavior. We give more importance to the achievement, something we achieve by our performance or by our work, or we give importance to the ascription, that is which we get by our birth. So that was the dilemma between the ascription and the achievement. The last one of the pattern variable that the Talcott Parsons was discussing is the question of specificity versus diffuseness, whereby he was basically talking about the interest that the object have in the social phenomena, or what is the scope of the interest that the object can have in the case of social phenomena. This dilemma was basically explained with the question of specificity versus diffuseness. Although the Talcott Parsons was successful to provide important understanding of the functional analysis of the society, but his understanding was criticized within the functionalism itself with the development of neo-functionalism in the post-1980. But what we need to keep in mind, the functionalism or the structural functionalism of the Talcott Parsons was one of the dominant factor in the American sociology. So he was the dominant leading social theorist at a particular time during the 1950s or the post-1950. In the 1960s, he was the single most dominant theorist from America. But over the period of time, there were some criticism that were emerging against the functionalism of Talcott Parsons. And as I already mentioned, it was seen from the work of Jeffrey Alexander, especially in the 1980. And one of the important criticism was the too much emphasis that was given on the integration by the Talcott Parsons. And that is what was criticized by the work of Jeffrey Alexander. Although Jeffrey Alexander criticized the work of Talcott Parsons, he in a way also helped in the kind of revival of the functionalism, because although he was pointing out to the critical points or the criticism that we need to keep in mind while understanding functionalism of Talcott Parsons, he also helped in the continuation of the legacy of Parsons by reformulating or re-understanding the work of Talcott Parsons. So we can say on the one hand he was critical of the teleology, or he was critical of the too much emphasis on integration that was given by Talcott Parsons. On the other hand, he actually helped in the continuation of the basic idea of functionalism by his own theory of neo-functionalism. So we see in this module that that work of Talcott Parsons, or his work of unit act, his work on voluntaristic theory of action, his AGIL model, then we also see the various pattern variable as discussed by Talcott Parsons. We try to see the problem or the criticism of Talcott Parsons' work as it was provided within the broader school of neo-functionalism developed by Jeffrey Alexander. So here in the context of how the Talcott Parsons see action only in terms of constrained by the structure, but what the neo-functionalism tried to do, they try to see the interaction that actually take place between the action and the structure. So both action can influence the structure as structure can influence the action. So this understanding of Talcott Parsons will also help you to know some of the new emerging pattern of neo-functionalism that is taking place in the contemporary sociological discourse. Thank you.